For today's Quick Tips for DMs, we are going to talk about homebrewing. Hello everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire, here to talk to you today about homebrewing in today's Quick Tips for DMs. And homebrewing is just one of the... Homebrewing is one of those things that's just really fascinating when you get down into it, because you do it a little too much and get a little bit overzealous, you can quickly create something that's broken. But take too much of a soft touch to things and, well, you can end up with stuff that's just kind of ineffective. And neither of those is ideal. And it's one of those things that's hard to get right, to the point that I would recommend that most new DMs, you probably don't really want to do too much with it, or at least not anything too big, too major right off the bat. Give yourself a little bit of time, but it is something I think you're supposed to do at a certain point. Not that playing just what is stock and standard in the different adventure settings is wrong. Like, you know, if anybody wants to just wander around the Forgotten Realms, explore, put adventures there, and have their players go into that, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that in the slightest. But I do think you're supposed to homebrew and put your own personal touch to things from time to time. But before we get into all of that, if you're new here to the channel, go on down there, hit the subscribe button, and become a regular member here at the Gamer's Den. Or if you've already gone on ahead and listed yourself on such an incredible roster of legendary heroes, then go on down to hit the like button and share the video far and wide. But now let's keep talking about homebrewing and why I think it's an inevitability, because the rules, as I've said before some time ago, the rules are a framework to get you started. The real meat that's going to be on the adventure is going to come from you and everything that you're able to put together for it. And man, do you have a lot of ingredients and so many different ways to cut a story. You could have your prime rib, your T-bone, your roast. Sorry, never record while hungry. But the point is, once you have your story, you can put in all the twists and turns. Think of all the different ways that you can season it and exactly how you want to cook the story to perfection. There's just so much that you can do, and it's incredibly exciting. But, you know, again, this is stuff that you're already putting your own personal touch on. The instant you look at a map and go, these mountains here, these mountains just a little bit south of Luskin, that could use a really good dungeon. You're already putting your own homebrew on it. Now, you know, again, the setting's written in such a way as to be open-ended enough to where you can do those things without really doing a whole lot to break canon, but you're still adding in your own little details, and that's just the start of things right there. Eventually, you're going to be adjusting and tweaking stat blocks outside of what the rules normally allow. Not in necessarily any way that's meant to be unfair, but maybe throwing in just that unique twist that represents this villain for a long-running campaign that your players have had several encounters with. Such a little extra thing can make the fight more challenging, more interesting, and it instantly becomes that much more unforgettable for your players. Because I won't lie, the first time the party fells an orc chieftain or deals with some thuggish ogre brute that's just been waylaying travelers by the roadside, it's gonna feel great. It's gonna feel awesome. They've got this incredible character that's getting started doing great things already that most of the mortal men and women on the same plane of existence of them couldn't even dream of to begin with, to even try to attempt something like that. And that's great, but eventually everything can kind of blend together after a little while, even if, well, that first orc chieftain was a barbarian, this one's a fighter, this one's a rogue. Still an orc chieftain of some variety or another. Sure, the different classes can keep it interesting, but after a while, your players have dealt with those kinds of characters before in one campaign or another. So, putting in your own unique little touches is something you should be doing. Again, it doesn't have to be grandiose, doesn't have to be epic in scope, but even just putting slight tweaks and variations on things can make things that much more interesting. Have vampires that aren't fazed by holy items that are presented so proudly to them. I mean, they already kind of do that a little bit with Strahd, but the point is, you can adjust and play with things a bit. You can even put in, werewolves that are more resistant to silver. It's going to take a little bit more. Maybe the silver has to be consecrated or holy in some variety. You have all kinds of fae that you can introduce to the game, borrowing from other books even, while you can make an argument about how much of that is actually homebrewing and more copy-pasting with some slight edits, saying, whatever, till the cows come home, but your introduction of them is still making an adjustment. Not in a way that contradicts with or conflicts with any canon. You should be coming up with new fae creatures. So monster manuals and DM guides and all of that, they typically have sections about here's how you create these monsters. And it's an incredible toolbox with a lot of tools in it that will let you put together all different kinds of things depending on whatever recipe or goal you have in mind is. But eventually, you're not going to have the tools that you need. They're just not going to exist in that toolbox. So you have to create them. And there's a historical context for this as well, in that blacksmiths would find that they don't quite have the tools they need to accomplish the task that they have in mind. How do they do it? Well, they make the tool. They make the tool, and given that they have spent so much of their lives in metalworking and understand how the forge, the iron, and all the different pieces that they're working with come together, they figure out, I think this kind of a hook shape would work for the tool that I'm going for, or this rounded curve, or whatever the case may be. They will create their own tool sets, and they start teaching their apprentices and any journeymen that might be working with them how to utilize and make these tools themselves and what function they're for, and they pass on that experience. But now I'm losing the plot and diving on to so many other things, but you get the idea. Eventually you are going to have to create something yourself that fits the vision that you have in mind. And for anybody who's like, well, I don't ever want to homebrew, I don't like the idea of homebrewing, at least not to that extent, this isn't meant to bash you in any sort of a way. This is just meant to be a quick tip and advice and encourage people, especially DMs that are gaining more experience and confidence under their belts, to go forward and go ahead and start tweaking and playing with things a little bit. Try to test them out beforehand before you throw them at your party, if that's the kind of thing you have homebrewed, some kind of encounter. But still, go ahead and do it. Try it. It's a lot of fun. And once you get better at being a DM, doing the storytelling and actually running the game, you're going to get better at shaping and fitting those tools to your needs, and getting better at the feel for how the mechanics and the math work out. I'm not the best at the mathematical side of things, having to kind of rework things over in my head a bit, but I've got a pretty good feel and gauge for what my players are able to cope with and deal with, and what's fun for them, and they like the new challenges that I throw at them. But what do you think? Go on down to the comments below and let me know your thoughts. Did you like today's video? Did you dislike it? Let me know your thoughts either way in the comments down below so we can engage in discussion. And remember, if you're new here to the channel, go on down there, hit the subscribe button, and become a regular member here at the Gamers Den. But with all that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Thank you all so very much for your time, and you all have yourselves a good night.